negotiators, no way our administration could come back from talks giving up significantly on domestic support, domestic subsidies. Remember, really, domestic subsidies are kind of the only chips that the United States has to play at the negotiating table. So if we're going to play them, and when I say we, speaking from the standpoint of the U.S., if they're going to be played, you have to get something in return because they're gone for good once you play them. So there's no way that they could come back with an agreement that would actually allow for higher barriers in agriculture in two of the markets. I mean, talk about, sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Talk about, markets of the present and markets of the future. This is where the action is for U.S. agriculture. It's in China and India and the developing world. So it really was a non-starter. The United States objected, and the upshot of it is that the Doha talks are dead, or at least dead in the water, nearly 4 years. That's a typo. It should be 4 years after the original implementation deadline. So meanwhile, it's election season in the United States. These talks have now dragged out over the course of basically the entire Bush administration, 2 terms. And when I said last-ditch talks that took place in July, the reason they were last-ditch talks is that everybody knew that if they didn't come to at least an agreement in principle on the basic outlines of a deal prior to the U.S. election season, that it wasn't going to happen anytime in the near future. So we've got elections, remember, not just for president, but also for Congress. We've got the entire House of Representatives running, because they run every 2 years, and 1/3 of the 100-member Senate. That's the U.S. election cycle. So it's both president and Congress. So what are the implications of the fact now that we're in election season? Well, first of all, the lame duck status of the Bush administration is painfully obvious to everyone, including to folks overseas who might be negotiating with us. We've had the Democratic convention. We're now having the Republican convention, which fortunately, because Hurricane Gustav was not as bad as feared, the Republicans have been able to resume their convention and kind of more or less go back to normal course of business. U.S. policymakers, whether it's the administration or Congress, everybody's focused on elections. People are focused on getting reelected. Nobody's paying attention to trade issues at this point. Regardless of what happens with the presidential election, whether it's Senator Obama or Senator McCain that ultimately becomes president, we're going to have a new administration in 2009. That administration is going to have to be installed. You'll have to have the cabinet members nominated. You'll have to have that whole process kind of play out. That takes a while. So realistically, it's hard to imagine how the Doha talks could resume before 2010, if at all. And I say if at all because it remains to be seen whether the political willingness is there, not just on the part of the United States, but on the part of all the key groups involved, the EU, the G20, Japan, whether there really is the political willingness to restart these things. And of course, when they failed, everybody pointed the finger at everybody else, trying to pass blame and say, well, it wasn't us, it was the other guy. And it really does kind of call into question whether the political willingness to do this is there. In kind of thinking about, okay, down the road, what are the chances, if there is to be any chance of a revival, of a resurrection of the Doha talks? Obviously, the U.S. is going to be central in this. We're still the largest trading nation in the world. We don't have the largest trade surplus. We've probably got the largest trade deficit, but we are a huge trading nation, and we are going to play, you can't have a WTO Doha deal without the United States. That's clear. So that begs the question, where do the presidential candidates stand on trade? What do the elections mean for the prospects for the Doha round? And again, of course, for those of you who may not know this, Barack Obama is the candidate of the Democratic Party, and he's been in the United States Senate since only 2004. He's from Illinois. John McCain is the Republican Party candidate. He's been in the Senate since 1986, and he's from Arizona. Okay, well, here's Here's Obama's position summarized on trade, and this is right from the website. I'm just quoting here from the Obama.com website. And you can see here the header is "The Fight for Fair Trade." And it says that Obama will stand firm against agreements that undermine our economic security. He will fight for a trade policy that opens up foreign markets to support good American jobs. Not jobs at McDonald's, good American jobs. He will use trade agreements to spread good labor and environmental standards around the world. And I just want to point out, in terms of labor and environmental standards, there is a standing WTO ministerial declaration that says labor and environmental standards will not be part of WTO, any WTO agreement. Okay, so there you go, right in the position statement of the candidate. He will also pressure the World Trade Organization to enforce trade agreements and stop countries from continuing unfair government subsidies. Presumably that doesn't include the United States. To foreign exporters and non-tariff barriers on U.S. exports. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Now here's John McCain on trade. Lower barriers to trade. John McCain believes that globalization, there's that word, globalization, is an opportunity for American workers. 95% of the world's customers lie outside our borders. The U.S. should therefore engage in multilateral, regional, and bilateral efforts to reduce barriers to trade, to level the global playing field, and build effective enforcement of global trading rules. Again, that's from the McCain campaign website. Here's a look at the voting records of the two candidates on trade. And this data, this information is from the Cato Institute, which is a nonprofit think tank based in Washington, which is dedicated to a policy debate and shedding light on policies with the goal of promoting free trade and basically democratic capitalism. So that's kind of where they're coming from on this. And you can find this on the web at the web address that's listed here. The web page is Free Trade, Free Markets, Rating Congress. Okay, so looking at Barack Obama, during his short tenure in the Senate, he's participated, there's been a total of 18 votes involving trade barriers or trade subsidies. In the 11 votes involving trade barriers, he voted to oppose trade barriers only on 4 of those, so only 36% of the time. He voted on the 2 votes opposing trade subsidies during his tenure. He voted not to oppose those trade subsidies both times, so 0% there. And then he didn't vote on 5 out of the 18 votes, probably because he was out on the campaign trail. So he gets a designation from the Cato Institute of interventionist isolationist, so bad as far as the Cato Institute is concerned. Looking at John McCain's voting record, in the 65 votes, considerably longer track record for Senator McCain, that have taken place while he's been in the Senate, you've had 40 of those were involving trade barriers. 35 times, or 88% of the time, he voted to oppose those trade barriers. Trade subsidies, there were 10 votes. He voted on 8 of those to oppose, or 80% of the time, to oppose trade subsidies, and he didn't vote on 15 out of the 65 votes. So he gets a designation from the Cato Institute, and I don't know, you probably can't see this at the bottom, but he gets a designation of free trader, which is, like the Medal of Honor as far as the Cato Institute is concerned. Okay, so that begs the question. Would a Doha resurrection, if possible at all, would a Doha resurrection be more likely under a President Obama or under a President McCain? Let's have a show of hands. How many think President Obama? Let's see, I don't see any. How many think President McCain? Okay, a few. Come on, people, vote. This is your opportunity to vote. Exercise your free will. Okay, so the consensus is McCain. Well, I would submit that a Doha resurrection would be more likely under this man.